Good afternoon. We're getting right down to business here. We're doing it live, doing more at 4, weekday afternoons, right after Guy Benson at 3, and just before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5. It's Mottek On Money, live on the air and 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com and your on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple iTunes, YouTube, all your favorite podcast platforms. It looked like the Sell America trade was set to make a comeback today after the big news that you first heard here on 790 KBC. Moody's decided to strip the U.S. of its top-tier credit rating late Friday, made the news here on Friday afternoon. But it looks like we saw an impressive comeback today in the financial markets, especially on this side of the pond. The Dow coming in for a closing gain of 137 points, selling at 42,792. The S&P 500 also ended higher by 5 points at 5,964. The NASDAQ gained 4 at 19,215. The volatility index day up 5%. Gold at around 3,230 an ounce. Crude oil just below $63 a barrel. Bitcoin rallied over the weekend, right now hovering at around 105,355. It did get close to its record high, got up to around 107,000 over the weekend. And we see Ethereum right now hovering just below 2,500 and Doge at the moment at 22 cents. Moody's downgrading the U.S. credit rating to AA1, citing the $36 trillion debt and rising deficits causing market turbulence, as well as a spike in Treasury yields. We have kept an eye on those bond yields, those Treasury yields, which impact fixed-rate mortgage rates. And we'll be taking a closer look at that coming up this hour with mortgage expert Jeff LAZERSON, the president of MortgageGrader.com, also Orange County Register real estate columnist. We did see the yield on the 10-year note, which impacts those fixed-rate mortgage rates, popping above 5% for a time today. Switzerland's central bank gave a vote of confidence to U.S. government bonds today, and that eased some concern, saying there is no alternative to them, according to a Bloomberg report. We also heard from China today, urging the U.S. to, according to a Chinese official, immediately correct its wrongdoings, unquote, and stop discriminatory measures. Again, the Chinese view after the U.S. issued guidance warning companies not to use advanced computer chips from China, including Huawei's Ascend AI chips. Closer to home this afternoon, we'll check the crime blotter with a home invasion robbery in Westwood this afternoon. A dramatic situation there with a security guard shooting and wounding a burglary suspect. Also, the bombing outside of Palm Springs Fertility Clinic was an act of terrorism, according to authorities there investigating that huge explosion. I'll discuss the latest with the Honorable Dennis ZINE, former L.A. City Council member and former LAPD sergeant, will be joining me live later this hour. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, and the whole works today. Joining us live now, top-ranked money manager Ken WINANS, the president and chief investment officer at WINANS Investments, which you can find at winansinvestments.com. Ken WINANS, also a market historian, author of numerous books. His latest is Investment Atlas 3, Creating Wealth Using Historical Trends. Also has his crypto credentials. Most importantly, he's host of Winning with WINANS, which you'll be hearing this evening at 6 o'clock, right here on your favorite station, 790 KBC. Ken WINANS, good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon, Frank. And you know, it's great to start a Monday with, yes, there was bad news over the weekend, but I'll be darned if our market just still continues to climb the famous wall of worry. And you know, as I looked at the afternoon headlines after the close, and the one that actually caught my eye, and I almost choked on my water as I was reading it, this came from Bloomberg's evening briefing. Congressional Republicans risk fiscal disaster. And I talked to a friend of mine. I said, okay, let me understand this. They're worried about a possibility of a recession, but you guys would rather have taxes revert to where they were pre-2016, which would take money out of people's pockets, would really cause problems. That's a better alternative. And so my point in all this is that even with the financial press, people are going to have to put a serious, excuse my French, BS filter on what they're reading, and they got to consider what the agenda is of the people who write these things. But Frank, again, the market is doing amazingly well in spite of the headwinds of just continuous bad news.
On there live with Ken Winans, and looking forward to continuing the conversation tonight at 6 o'clock when we have the whole hour to discuss what happened last week and look ahead. Ken Winans, let me ask you this. We did see quite a reaction. It was a nervous start this morning, and the volatility index did end up higher by 5% today. The stock market here ended up higher. We did see a reaction in the bond market, and it was very interesting to see how the cryptos reacted to that downgrade of the U.S. Credit rating. What are your thoughts about the overall reaction here and the dust settling the way it did today?
At the very beginning of this year, you and I talked a lot about what to expect and across the board. And I think we literally did say, and it's turning out to be true, a very, very volatile year, what we would call a range-bound market, whether it's crypto stocks or almost any other kind of asset class, where there's not a lot of just straight-up momentum. I mean, there's things that hit lows, have come back, but they're still right around where they were, where they started the year. And so, I mean, Frank, I think at the end of the day, you had the same thing happen earlier. The dollar initially fell, gold spiked, crypto spiked. There was just all this stuff moving around. But at the end of the day, things calmed down very quickly. Stocks regained their composure. And I actually believe it was interesting just watching some of the headlines coming out. We're getting ready to go into retail earnings season, not to mention we have reports coming out on servicing manager reports, a lot of data on real estate coming out Thursday and Friday. And a lot of people are, even the naysayers are saying, well, it's not good, but it's not as bad as I thought it would be. And I think that's going to be the way this plays out. I'll tell you another really funny, quick story. I was talking to a fellow money manager today, and they were talking about, we were somehow talking about the holiday season and how there's, we talk about toys and the shortages of toys. And I flatly said to the guy, I said, if that's true, then why is Hasbro and Mattel stocks both up 13 and 22% on the year? Why? If they're going to not be able to sell anything, why are these stocks doing so well? So it kind of goes back to what I said earlier, in some other broadcasts about retailers. Again, I mean, the stock market's telling you something different than what you're hearing in social media posts and certainly in general media.
On there live with Ken Winans, and as we've discussed many times, the stock market is a forward-looking mechanism, right? What does history tell us about that?
Well, I mean, it's very true that, and look, at the end of the day, there's no perfect predictor of stocks. We all know that. However, what seems to be working right now, for those of us who are technicians, and I certainly am one, I look at internals such as advanced decline lines, high-low lines, moving averages, on balance, basically volume levels up versus down. You look at all these things and you say, wait a minute, when you're looking at the patient, maybe it's had some hiccups this year, as it certainly did. But it's all in all not bad. If you're a technician and you look at market analysis and you look at individual stock selection, you might find you're having a pretty good year. So, Frank, you asked about history. History is stating that this is a stock picker's market. We've had other times in the past where tariffs and strikes, very similar to that strike that hit the New Jersey Transit, this has all happened before. We have played this game before, and there are times when the market just doesn't go anywhere, but it doesn't mean you can't make money, but you do have to pivot. You do have to change your tactics.
On the live with Ken Winans on a day we've ended higher, despite the nervous start today with that Uncle Sam credit downgrade on Friday by Moody's. Another thing that's certainly impacting the markets is what's happening in Washington these days with one of the economic agencies projecting that President Trump's tax policy and the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill will lead to increased take-home pay for families and higher wages for American workers. We did get that today from the Council of Economic Advisors, which advises the White House on economic policy. So we're watching what's happening in Washington there. Ken, what do you make of the way this drama is playing out there?
Well, it's kind of, when I was back in Carson City for the legislative session in Nevada, they call it the sausage making. It's the making of laws and regulations and all this other good stuff. And the sausage is definitely being made in some unusual ways in Washington. I think at the end of the day, they will get this bill done. I don't think it will be done before July. But, Frank, here's the thing. If I had to play this through, we're going to have the continued nervousness really going through a good part of summer between the big, beautiful bill, which is a big part of President Trump's package, the deregulation rules that they're still muddling through, the tariffs. I think we play this saga out for a good part of the summer. But when we get into the fall, when you have everything firing on all cylinders, I would just tell everybody, if you're going to keep your powder dry for the summer, that's fine. But you should at least be prepared. If things really do come together going into the fall, I would highly advise you to not sit behind and let it go by you. However you may feel politically, you got to go with the economics. So no, I think that we're going to continue to have ebbs and flows. I know tonight on Winning on WINANS, we're going to talk a lot about what's happening with the deductions for state and local taxes. That's continuing to be talked about. And we're going to have a little bit of a discussion about it, because now that I live in Nevada, I don't quite see the same way that a California does anymore. So I think it's worth discussing, why are people having these debates? But Frank, it's going to be going on this way for a while. It really is.
All right. And what about, let's talk more about crypto here with Bitcoin getting close to its record high here over the weekend. That's certainly noteworthy, up around 107,000, now at around 105. And what about that? And analog gold, its performance now coming off its recent all-time high around 3,200.
Well, two things. I think they're both moving for a lot of the same reasons, even though they're not identical. I would just tell everybody about Bitcoin. I wrote about it last year in my Forbes articles. You know, we can't explain why, but Bitcoin and NASDAQ have this amazing relationship. It's a little hard to understand why, especially the NASDAQ 100. But when it's not so much level, but it's trends. And the fact that the trends on both of them turned at about the same time, started heading back up, and also the fact that, quite frankly, you talked about Ethereum. For anybody who's basically been an Ethereum holder, you've had a miserable year, but it's bounced back a lot, and also Solana. So I think, again, you're having a lot of the murkiness that it really hurt the cryptos is coming back. But I will also say it really caught everybody by surprise about what happened to Coinbase last week with the hacking. This was considered probably the most secure place to go for a wallet in crypto world. This would be like the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ getting hacked. So it has a few people really worried right now. And then there was another article I read earlier today. I guess that some of the people who have made a lot of money in crypto, they're actually being targeted, and some of them are being kidnapped in Europe. So it's a Wild West show with crypto, but I do think it is going to be deregulated. Financial institutions in the United States are going to be picking it up later this year and early next year. And even if people don't want to be in it, they need to better understand it, because it will affect your other investments.
All right. What do you see ahead for good old analog gold here, coming off its record high above 3,500 earlier this year, right now at last check here at 3,230?
Well, I would say this. The old adage, trend is your friend, is really pertaining to gold. I mean, when you look at what it has done, and I'll be happy to say that, Frank, you were one of the first to certainly talk about it on Mottek On Money. It's just been astounding, the run this thing has had. Even before inflation was, beginning to come down, we were talking about, hey, wait a minute, you need to think about having this. I would say that what I have found is that there were a lot of people that were basically saying, I'm going to have money in energy and I'm going to have money in metals. And what I'm finding is that since the energy play has been downright harsh, really for the first 6 months of this, or 5 months of this year, there's more money moving toward gold. The only thing I would say about gold, copper's had a good year, silver's had a good year, nothing like gold. But, I think you have to be very careful. If you are going to buy gold, just understand it's had one heck of a run. And when it turns sharp. Just be very disciplined. If you buy it, you should be prepared to get out of it if it really does go down. But at this point, the trend is moving in the right direction. The internals look strong. I would certainly buy it on a dip without any hesitation.
All right. What about the move in the Treasury note yields, which impact mortgage rates? Of course, you also have a real estate index, and you're watching what's happening with mortgage rates and real estate. What do you see happening with those note yields, which impact the mortgage rates and that spike that we saw today, and then the pullback?
Well, it's going to be interesting to watch the real estate data that comes out on Thursday and Friday, and I actually think it's going to be somewhat accurate, because it is going to be the first real estate data we've had since the tariff announcements. And with that, it's very regional on real estate, but what I continue to hear about as the comeback play is commercial real estate, with people going back to the office. I hear a lot more about that where it was people who last year wanted to own the homeowner or the home builders. They wanted to play the continued housing shortage. But a lot of that money has moved back into REITs that are more focused on commercial, and not so much strip malls, Frank, but really office buildings. So I think that there's been a shift in real estate, but I would just say this. I think the real estate market, I know in Las Vegas, it really depends on the neighborhood. Even here, although the economy is doing quite well, even the various neighborhoods are different. So I think you're going to find that whether it's Southern California, Greater Las Vegas, Salt Lake City, Phoenix, Austin, Texas, I think you're going to hear the same story. But what I am hearing, though, is that a lot of the offers are now coming out as contingent offers on someone else being able to sell another house. So I'm not a real estate broker, but I'm hearing that from my friends who are. So I think deals are not going to happen at the same speed they were certainly 2 years ago.
All right, and speaking of deals, President Trump coming back from the Middle East with trillions in deals. Anything catching your attention here? That Boeing deal certainly was a big one, and the list goes on.
Former MLB All-Star Sean Casey, a.k.a. The Mayor, keeps hitting it out of the park.
I don't need to hear anything from anybody. There's too much riding on my mind being locked in. Play offense, not defense. If you play hard and you play the game right, nobody really gets on you. They're going to boo you here and there, but if you show them that you care and that you're playing hard, that's what you need to do. Just play the game one way. You hit a ball in the gap, run. Boom, coming in hot.
The Mayor's Office with Sean Casey from Believe.
Follow and listen on your favorite platform.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Boeing basically made up for 2 years of losses in one swoop. The other company that, it's funny we talk about the Magnificent Seven techs, but one of the ones that caught my eye that actually was part of that whole junket was IBM. But anybody who hasn't looked at old Big Blue in a long time, you might want to go take a look at it. It's up 22% on the year. So my point is that I think that some of these old line companies that accompanied President Trump on that trip, there might be a correlation in their stock performance based on what happened there. But Frank, presidents used to do this. I've studied presidencies in my books going back, 150 years. Presidents used to go and promote American business. And then, in fact, it was Calvin Coolidge that said, what's good for business is good for America, back in the 1920s. So I think we're just doing a throwback, but I think there's going to be more trips to come, more deals to come. And I think more important than that, the trade, a lot of these trade deals just are going to start closing. They're going to start where just like it was with the United Kingdom. And as this happens and clarity enters the new trade picture, I think we'll find that a lot of the hysteric headlines actually begin to calm down. But no, I think it was a marvelous success personally, and I couldn't have been prouder to see our president out there with our allies trying to, not only make geopolitical peace, but do trade. It's perfect. That's what we pay him to do.
All right, before I let you off the hook here, and then we'll continue the conversation tonight at 6, Ken Winans, any specific places where you are putting money now and or taking it off the table?
Well, let me start with where I take it off the table. I mean, it's very clear. When I look at my own stock index, which is a legacy stock index, meaning looking at the oldest companies that publicly trade, I mentioned earlier about technical analysis. I watched the 200-day moving average very closely, and literally of this list of 420 companies, 52% of them they are below their 200-day moving average, and 48% of them are above their 200-day moving average. So the moral of the story is you are now in May. Summers are typically volatile. I think anybody with a stock portfolio who has losses in it, stocks that are losing money, I really suggest you either trim those positions back at a minimum or downright get rid of them just because they're not performing well. There's plenty of other names out there that you probably haven't looked at, like I talked about before with IBM versus the Magnificent Seven. This thing's doing well. You just have to pivot. If you want to make money this year, you're going to have to pivot, and I would do that now before you get into the dog days of summer.
Terrific, Ken. Thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon. That is Ken Winans, President and Chief Investment Officer at Winans Investments, which you can find at winansinvestments.com. Author of numerous books, his latest, Investment Atlas 3, also Forbes magazine contributor, most importantly, host of Winning with Winans, heard every Monday night at 6 p.m., and that's tonight, right here on your favorite station, 790 KBC. Ken, thank you very much. Look forward to speaking with you at 6 o'clock this evening.
And we have a lot to talk about tonight, Mr. Mottek. I'll see you later.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Looking forward to it. And right now, let's get out to the freeways here on 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues, 790 KBC. Nervous start to the day on Wall Street, but at the end, a higher close for stocks, with the Dow closing up 137 points at 42,792. S&P 500 of 5 at 5,964, and the NASDAQ of 4 points at 19,215. The volatility index, the Wall Street Fear Index, The VIX index did move higher by 5%. The price of gold slipping about $3 now, back to $3,230 an ounce. Silver at $32.49 an ounce. Crypto saw a big move over the weekend, with the Bitcoin getting up to around 107,000. Right now down about 200 at 105,300 or so. Ethereum down about 20, back to 2,499 after a big move over the last week or so. Doge right now at 22 cents. Solana at 165 and change. Nvidia, the magnificent one, moving higher at the close, 17 cents, 135.57. Apple slipping to $248 at 208.78 a share. Netflix higher by 11 cents at 1191.64. Boeing, which saw a big move last week following the deals announced by President Trump in the Middle East, pulling back slightly today, down 57 cents at 205 and change. IBM, mentioned by Ken Winans a few moments ago, moving higher today by $1.65 at 268.41. All this in reaction to Moody's cutting the Uncle Sam credit rating a notch from AA1 from AAA on Friday due to likely difficulty financing the federal government's growing budget deficit and the ramifications of rolling over existing debts in a period of high borrowing costs. The yield in the 10-year note briefly popped above 5% before slipping back to 4.92%. We will discuss that. That's the one that impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates, and they have moved higher. Rates on mortgages, car loans, and credit cards tracking the 10-year yield. Mortgage rates did tick higher. We'll get an update on that this afternoon from Jeff Lazerson, the president of MortgageGrader.com, and also Orange County Register real estate columnist. Jeff Lazerson will be joining me live in the next half hour. Right now, the latest news for you on 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues here, 790 KBC. Some businesses increasing security following an explosion outside of Palm Springs Fertility Clinic over the weekend, which authorities say was an act of terrorism. In fact, it's one of the biggest explosion investigations ever in California, with the FBI authorities comparing the gravity of the bombing over the weekend to the Aliso Viejo bombing in Orange County in 2018. Authorities are still investigating exactly what happened, but based on the investigation news we got so far into this deadly explosion led by the FBI, they deemed it an intentional act of terrorism. At the site of this Palm Springs fertility clinic, focused on a person of interest identified by the FBI as a 25-year-old man from 29 Palms. Joining us live now is the Honorable Dennis ZINE, former L.A. City Council member, former LAPD police sergeant with 56 years plus service to the City of Angels. Dennis ZINE, thank you for coming to the line here. Give us your reaction to what happened over the weekend.
Well, Frank, another tragic situation for all of Southern California. We look at the territory that we cover, and this tragedy claimed a life. The perpetrator of this vicious crime, and thank goodness no one else was injured. A lot of property damage. Obviously, federal authorities, local authorities will be investigating to find out the focus. But this young man was very young, and how he became so distorted in his views to commit a act like this and to die subsequent to this act, this violent act, to blow up the place on a very pleasant day. So there's a lot of questions to be answered. I'm sure the authorities will be very thorough in the investigation to find out the cause. Fortunately, the clinic was saved as far as the specimens that were there, that were being housed there, being cared for. Though people want children, and they should have a right to have children and not be hampered in that and have this type of tragic situation take place in a reproductive center that is there to assist people. So a tragedy, and especially an individual at that young age to commit such a heinous act and to have the implements to carry this act out and to die subsequent to that and to leave a note exactly what it was about. It's very, very tragic. A lot of resources are going to be involved and a lot of tragedy involved.
Yeah, notice I'm not mentioning his name, and it looks like he tried to live stream this horrific act as well, unsuccessfully. Just a crazy act here, which the FBI continues to investigate. The explosion was very, very significant. Based on your contacts, it looks like it's been years since we've seen anything like this here.
We've had explosions here in this region of Southern California. Nothing to this magnitude, but there's been situation where these situations have taken place, but not to this particular magnitude. And obviously, thank goodness it was a day where there's not a lot of foot traffic down there in that particular area. But anti-pro-life, you've got different aspects of society. Some believe, some don't believe. And when you have it carried out in this manner by a very young individual, that's very tragic. To think an individual of that age, very young age, would carry out this act, how distorted that individual would be in the dealing with people, the family, et cetera, school, whatever type of engagement they're involved in. A terrible tragedy. And then the consequences of this explosion, not just the center itself, not just the reproductive center, but the surrounding businesses and areas that were impacted with the blown out windows, blown out doors. And I did some research in that area of Palm Springs, and there was a lot of damage subsequent to this particular facility that was damaged by this bombing.
Right. The Desert Sun reports 4 people were injured, by the way. Numerous buildings were damaged or destroyed in that immediate area where this clinic was located. And the initial indication is that what was inside the clinic was safe. So this is really, really something. So we're going to continue to follow that story very, very closely. Back here in Los Angeles now, we're on the air live with the Honorable Dennis Zine, former Los Angeles City Council member, former LAPD sergeant. Looks like a security guard opened fire on suspected burglars in Westwood this morning. What do we know about that situation there? One burglar was hit.
We know there's a lot of burglaries taking place in the areas of Los Angeles, all regions, from the San Fernando Valley, the east side, west side, et cetera. Businesses broken into, burglaries. We know we've got a very aggressive district attorney who is going after these individuals, but in this particular case, a security guard, I'm sure licensed and knew what the security guard was doing, used a deadly force in this particular situation. There had to be a situation that extended the use of deadly force, but there's a tremendous amount of break-ins in rich areas, exclusive areas of this region, and I know that people are concerned and they're fearful, and they hire private security for that particular purpose. There'll be a thorough investigation by the police agencies, the district attorney's office. Anytime you fire a weapon, and in the course of your employment, there's a lot of investigation, whether you're a police officer or a security officer. So that'll come out and show this particular circumstances. But again, people, and many people I've spoken to, are getting CCWs. You need to understand, if you have a CCW, carry concealed weapon, there are certain obligations, responsibilities, and liability on you. You need to make sure that when you fire that weapon, you're totally legal in doing that. You could suffer consequences, could be trial, and you could go to prison if you do it and it's not properly done.
On the air live with the Honorable Dennis Zine, and looks like the indication on the situation there in Westwood, break-in of a home there in the Westwood area east of UCLA. Looks like 3 suspects got away, and possibly a Mercedes was the getaway car. In these situations, as you reported, luxury cars are being used to pull up in front of these homes, right, to try to make them not conspicuous, and people getting out and robbing these places.
Exactly. Well, they rent a car, they steal a car, they switch plates, and they'll go into an area, a lucrative area, a nice area, and the car blends in. If you're going with a car that doesn't fit the area, you become suspicious. So that particular issue, these people were aware of what they were doing, and I'm sure this is not the first time they've committed that type of crime. So it's very common. People need to be watchful. They need to watch their neighbors, watch their neighborhoods, and if you see something, say something, notify the police. Make sure you do that as quickly as possible.
On the live with Dennis Zine, and certainly has the tone changed now under the new DA, Nathan Hochman, when it comes to these crimes, people are being actually prosecuted, right?
Well, it's more than a change. It's a catastrophe what the Gascon did. What has changed is we now have a district attorney who's enforcing the law, very aggressively enforcing the law. And this is exactly what we need to make sure that people are held accountable and that these burglars, these robbers, these rapists, these people committing violent crimes deter from that. And hopefully this will help affect that, where they'll decide to do something else instead of going out committing crimes and terrorizing communities as they've done. And lucrative, expensive communities are the ones that are being hit most often, whether it's the San Fernando Valley or the west side of Los Angeles.
No Contest Wrestling. O'Shea Jackson Jr. and TJ Jefferson with the biggest names in the game.
Give it up for the Dark Angel.
First one.
Meta. First.
I can't believe it.
NXT double champion. Welcome the King, Lexus King.
I don't know if I'd be where I'm at now if I didn't take the path that I took.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jada Parker.
What made you, after the soccer career, go WWE?
The answer I always have to that is like, why not?
The No Contest Wrestling Podcast, part of the Rich Eisen Podcast Network. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.
All right, and the LAPD still stretched pretty thin, right? Tell us about the efforts to get more officers on the force.
Well, to be honest with you, and I had a conversation today with the city controller on a board meeting. I said, the future does not look very bright for finances for Los Angeles. The budget, they're going to try and make things work as best they can, but you're not going to see the LAPD expand to any great degree. They're basically going to be where they're at. With all the events coming to Los Angeles, I don't know how they're going to handle it or manage it with these resources unless they bring people from other jurisdictions or merge with the Highway Patrol, Sheriff's Department. I worked the 84 Olympics, and I know we need a lot of personnel. They don't have sufficient personnel now to manage the city, where they're holding them overtime, giving them overtime, forcing them to work overtime, whether they're patrol units or detectives. They are short from every rank that you can imagine, and it's a critical situation, and hopefully this budget will help resolve some of it, but they want to cap the number of officers, and that's a bad mistake because the city needs to have enforcement by professional police officers that make things safe, period. Without that, we have problems that occur continuously, and people become victims because of that.
The Honorable Dennis ZINE, former LA City Council member, former LAPD Police Sergeant. Dennis ZINE, thank you very much for coming to the line.
Thank you. My pleasure, Frank.
Out to the freeways now, 790 KBC. It's Frank Mottek here for United Gold Group. Did you know that for more than 10,000 years, gold has been the greatest store of value and considered a safe haven asset to preserve your wealth? Well, now with the U.S. debt at more than $36 trillion and climbing, the possible recession on the horizon, and the development of the digital dollar central bank digital currency, it's more critical now than ever before to safeguard your assets like your cash savings and retirement accounts with physical gold. Opening a gold IRA is one of the best ways to secure your wealth and create a stable financial future. Tune in this Saturday at 8 a.m. to hear me interview Dave. He's the boss at United Gold Group, and you'll learn a lot about how to invest in gold. Or give my friends at United Gold Group a call right now at 800-753-8534. Mention Frank Mottek, and you could get up to $1,000 worth of silver with a qualifying purchase. Call now, 800-753-8534, or visit UnitedGoldGroup.com. Mottek On Money continues here, 790 KBC. One of the top stories of the day, mortgage rates have taken off after the yield in the 10-year note soared above 5% today. Did slip back to 4.92% later in the day. All this impacting borrowing costs, including mortgages. And joining us live now is Jeff Lazerson, the president of MortgageGrader.com, also Orange County Register real estate columnist. Jeff Lazerson, we did see the reaction in the bond market to the big news on Friday that the Moody's rating agency cut its credit rating, that is, one notch for Uncle Sam from AA1 to AA1 from AAA on Friday due to likely difficulty financing Uncle Sam's growing budget deficit. Give us your reaction to the big news here today.
Well, Frank, it's not going to help interest rates too much, with the debt and the deficit that we have, but we're going to just have to live with it. The 30-year fix today is at 6.5% at 1 point cost, 15 years at 5 5/8%, and that's up to $806,500. So rates locally haven't moved much one way or the other. They're up a little bit, but not too bad. High balance loans, that's 806,501 to $1,209,750 in LA and Orange County. The 30 years at 6 7/8, and the 15 years at 6 1/8. And then you can get a jumbo loan, anything over that, at 6 5/8%. So rates are up a little bit, but not too terrible for all the bad news that we've had in the bond market lately.
Where do you see the rates go from here?
Well, I think they're going to go up and then hopefully come back down. I'm still really concerned about with the tariffs and what that's going to do. Is that going to impact inflation and all that good stuff? But I would say in the short term they're going to go up and hopefully they'll start sliding down by the end of the year.
All right, and of course, you're on the front line of all this. Jeff Lazerson, as president of MortgageGrader.com. How is mortgage activity these days?
Well, it's actually been pretty good. The last month or two hasn't been bad at all. At least not for me. You know, it depends on who you talk to, but people are out there doing stuff again. The number of listings has doubled compared to 1 year ago. So there's more what we'll call liquidity in the market. You have a lot more people out there that have some choices to buy something. A lot of people didn't want to put their houses on the market because there was nothing to buy up to. And now we're seeing people just, shaking their hands and just saying, okay, I might get rid of my low interest rate and low property taxes, but I need a bigger home for my family. So we're starting to see that back in the marketplace, and consequently, we're seeing more mortgages happening on the purchase side.
But to that significant degree, what are some of the other reasons? Are people throwing in the towel here? What else are you hearing?
Well, it's really interesting, Frank. What I'm seeing now, we're getting into dangerous mortgage land again. Some of these wild loans. About a week ago, I was at a conference in Irvine, and there's just crazy loans out there again. So one lender offers condos that are short on the HOA insurance. They'll finance those, which, gosh, that's a dangerous thing. Somebody short on insurance, what happens if, God forbid, there's a fire? Another one, no sourcing of large deposits. So, Frank, you could put $500,000 into your bank account, come to me tomorrow for a loan, and I'm not going to ask you where that money came from. So, maybe it came from your uncle, or maybe it was laundered. I don't know, but they're not even asking for, a paper trail on it. And that's crazy. Fix and flip borrowers, 10% down. So somebody that wants to go in and fix up a tired property and sell it, only 10% down is needed now. Normally I see 20 or 25% down. Another one, the biggest one is, if you have a lousy credit score, let's say you have a 500 credit score and you want to get a loan, you could get somebody with, say, an 800 credit score who has more income. As long as their income is higher than yours, they'll ignore your credit score and they'll go with the person with the 800 credit score and use that to price the loan. So another dangerous loan. So I have some trepidation now about how aggressive the lenders are getting.
So fog the mirror loans, mortgages, are those back?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, for sure. Fog the mirror, 20% down. You got to have some cash reserves, but no job, no income. We don't ask. But, as long as you have the down payment and good credit, we're going to give you a loan. And, it's quite a quandary for the loan officers, because on one hand, I'm thinking, oh boy, but on the other hand, if somebody comes to you for a loan, you can't deny them. It's, you're here to serve the public. So it is quite a quandary that we're in, but this is the market that we're in.
Right, and this has been developing for some time. I remember you had shared with this audience that Angela Mazzillo, who famously headed up Countrywide Mortgage during the financial crisis days, came out of retirement and got a standing ovation at one of those conferences that you attended before he passed away a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah, that's right. It was a conference in Las Vegas. The National Association of Mortgage Brokers had him on, and I was really just dumbfounded that people would clap for him.
Well, Jeff, thank you very much for that important update here. Jeff Lazerson, president of MortgageGrader.com, also Orange County Register real estate columnist, live with me here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. Stay tuned now for 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang. And then at 6 o'clock, it's Winning with WINANS with top-ranked money manager Ken Winans and yours truly back on the air at 6. Stay tuned, 790 KBC.
Former MLB All-Star Sean Casey, a.k.a. The Mayor, keeps hitting it out of the park.
I don't need to hear anything from anybody. There's too much riding on my mind being locked in. Play offense, not defense. If you play hard and you play the game right, nobody really gets on you. They're going to boo you here and there, but if you show them that you care and that you're playing hard, that's what you need to do. Just play the game one way. You hit a ball in the gap, run. Boom, coming in hot.
The Mayor's Office with Sean Casey from Believe.
Follow and listen on your favorite platform.